Hi, I'm Dr. Sonali Garg. Today we'll be discussing tariffs. So we look at country A and it imposes a tariff on goods coming from country B. And what we'll study is we look at demand curve, we look at the supply curve, we look at the equilibrium, price and quantity. Then we'll see what happens when the tariff is imposed. And then we'll see the impact on consumers in country A and producers in country B, right? So this is the first round, and this will be for something that is a final consumption good. Let's say chocolates or chocolates or some fruit or something, right? And then we'll also look at something which is an input, so something like steel. So we look at that once. In that case, we look at the impact on producers in country A and consumers in country A, and of course producers in country B also, right? So let's start with the demand curve. So what we do is we assume that, let's say we're looking at chocolates. Let's say country A is importing chocolates from country B. So other things, anything other than the price of the chocolate itself, let's keep it constant, okay? Let's keep it unchanged. And then what we'll notice is that as the price goes up, people wish to buy less. As the price goes down, people want to buy more. So what we'll do is we'll draw a demand curve like this. We call this a demand curve. What does it show us? It shows us that as the price goes, let's say from 100, and people are buying 10 units, so the price goes to, let's say, 50, people are willing to buy more. All right. So that's going to be our demand curve. Next, we look at our supply curve. Supply curve shows you how much of a good producers are willing to supply at a particular price. So it shows that for a particular price, I'm willing to supply this quantity. If the price goes up, I'm willing to supply a larger quantity. So we keep the price of the good itself. We see how, when it changes, what happens to the amount that producers wish to supply. We're keeping everything else constant. So the idea is, as the price goes up, producers are willing to supply more. So we'll call this supply one. Okay. This is our supply curve. What does it show me? It shows me as the price goes from 50, let's say, and I'm willing to supply 10 units. When the price goes up to 100, producers are willing to supply more units. This is your supply curve, right? So now let's just quickly look at this, okay? And now let's say that this is the situation in the market. Now, what is what will happen in this market regarding price and quantity? So let's say we start somewhere here. Let's say when we begin, the situation, when the market opens, this is the price. Let's say this price is 100. At this price, I'm just making up the numbers, okay, out here. So let's say quantity supplied, this is quantity supplied. Let's say quantity supplied is 200. Okay, we go up to the supply curve, we see the quantity supplied. What is the quantity demanded? This is the quantity demanded. Let's call it, let's say 50. So producers are willing to supply 200 units, but consumers wish to buy only 50 units. All right. So what will happen? There'll be a surplus. There'll be more of this good that at this price, producers are supplying more of this good at this price than consumers are willing to buy. And so what producers will do is they'll lower the price. They'll keep lowering it until they reach this point. Right? We'll come to this point in a minute. All right. So please note there's a surplus out here. Too much of the good is there. So whenever the next time period when producers can change the price, they will change the price and it will keep going until we come to what we call the equilibrium price. Right? Just hypothetically make up a number. When they come to this price, we call this the equilibrium price. I'll call it E1 for right now, okay? Because we need this space for something else, okay? So what happens at this price? At this price, quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. If the market reaches this place and nothing else changes, the market will remain here. Also, suppose the market instead had started somewhere here. It had started, let's say, at a price of 50. In that case, the quantity demanded would be something like, let's say, 180, right? And the quantity supplied would be, let's say, 60. Now, at this point, what do we have? We have a shortage, right? More people want to buy this good than the producers are willing to supply at this price, so there'll be a shortage. And what will happen is producers realize that they can raise the price and then raise it until we come to E1. And once again at E1, what is happening? The quantity demanded is equal to the quantity supplied. Now, let's quickly look at what's happening at this price, okay? So let me just touch up these graphs, okay, just a little. Now, suppose there's no tariff, okay? So let's say this is the market for chocolates from country B in country A, all right? Now what happens is, what do we notice? So what is the price that will be there? We'll call it PE1, okay? This is the price that consumers will be paying. This is also the price that suppliers will get, all right? And the quantity in the market will be QE1. Now, the government of country A tells the producers in country B that for every unit that you sell, okay, so let's say this price is 100. I'm just making up these numbers, okay? So let's say this is 100. So what does it tell me? And let's say this quantity is 300 out here. 300,000, whatever, right? Some units, okay? Now 300 cartons, right? Something like that. So what it is telling me is that suppliers are willing to supply 300 units for a price of 100 rupees a unit, $100 a unit. So producers are willing to supply a quantity of 300 units for a price of $100 a unit, 100 rupees a unit, 100 pounds, a unit, right? That's what the supply curve is showing me. All right, now what happens is the government says, okay, I'm imposing a tariff. For every unit that you sell me, all right, you have to give me $10. So let's say the price is $100. The government says there are other types of tax where they say it is 10%, of the value, right? But, we'll leave that for later, right? So let's just keep a simple thing where the government says that for every unit that you import is called a per unit tax. For every unit that you bring into my country, country A tells country B is producer, you have to pay me $10. So now let's look at it from the producer's point of view, okay? So for the producer, earlier they were willing to supply 300 units for $100 per unit. But now when they do that, they have to pay the government $10. All right. So what will happen? They will want 100 plus $10. Why? Because when they sell it for $100, they have to give 10 to the government. So they'll only have 90 left for themselves. So they are not willing to supply this good for 90. They want $100 for this unit. So what they say is, okay, I'm willing to supply it for 100. Now I will raise the price to 110. Right? So what we'll do is we take take a measure like this, okay? And we'll say, okay, for each of these, okay, let me take it a little bit more, okay? So let me put it up here somewhere, okay? Sorry for that, okay? I'm putting it up here, okay? So what we are saying is that for each unit that they're selling, they want, this much more. So this amount is what they want now. This unit is 10, right? I'm just making up these numbers again. It is not to scale, but this is just to illustrate, okay? So this amount is 10. Okay, for each one, they want 10 more, okay? They should be a little bit more. 10. And so if this were 100, this would become 110. Does everybody see that? This is 110. Why? Because this amount, this distance is 10. I'll call this supply 2. Right? So what is happening now is, if the producer wishes to, in order to supply, if they're only willing to supply 300 units, if they get 110 per unit for these units, okay? Now let's look at what happens if they actually ask for this, okay? Now let's look at a price of 110. At a price of 110, what do we notice? Quantity supplied is greater than quantity demanded. There's a surplus, so the price will come down and we'll come to E2. Does everybody see? E2 is where the original demand curve cuts the new supply curve. This is where we are at, okay? Now, let's take a look, okay? So what does this mean, all right? This means, so what we see out here is, once the tariff is imposed, what is it? The producers are saying they are willing to supply 300 units if they get $100 per unit, right? The government of country A says that I'm going to put a tariff of $10 per unit. So now what they're saying is they know that every time they sell a unit, they have to give the government $10. So what they say is we will only supply 300 units if we get 110 per unit. So that is $10 here. So that's $100 there. That's another $10 there. Okay. So this is the new point. But at this point, at a price of 110, what we notice is quantity supplied is greater than quantity demanded. And so the price will come down until it comes down to the new equilibrium point where the new supply curve, supply 2, cuts the demand curve. All right. At which point now, once again, quantity demanded will be equal to quantity supplied. So first thing what we'll do is we look at QE2. And QE2 will be something less than 300. Let's say it's 250. Again, I'm making up these numbers, okay? Now, let's look at what happens to the price, okay? So what happens is that this is the new price now. I'm going to call it PE2. Now, please look carefully, okay? So let's say that if this is 100 and this is 110, let's say that this is 107. Okay, I'm just making up this number. It has to be something between 100 and 110. All right. So now what happens is consumers are paying 107. But what happens to the producer? The producer gets the foreign country, the producer in the other country gets 107 in their hand, but they have to give 10 to the government as tariff. So what do? 100. So 107 minus 10, which is 97 now. So they will go down all this way till here. This distance is 10, 10, 10, 10. And this is what the new price will be. This will be 97. Now, whether the price is 90, is 107 or it's 106 or 105 or 104 or 109. Okay, all that will depend upon the relative responsiveness of demand and supply. But we'll leave that for right now. But what do we notice now? We notice that firstly, the consumers in the country where the country A is imposing the tariff. So what do we see? The consumers in country A pay a higher price. Earlier, they were paying 100 for this. Now they're paying 107. So the burden on the consumers in country A is equal to what? 107 minus 100, which is 7. All right. And then what happens to the producers? The country from whom country A is importing, for them, their producers are also worse off. Why? Because earlier the burden on producers in country B is equal to what? 100 minus 97, which is equal to 3. All right. And of course, 7 plus 3 must add up to 10. That's how we constructed it. So please note that even though the money is paid to the government of country A by the producers in country B, the burden, the impact, the incidence of the tax, okay, is distributed between the consumers in country A and the producers in country B. So the consumers in country A are worse off now. Why? They are paying a higher price. This much is their burden. Okay, and they're getting a lower quantity. So they're able to buy less and they have to pay a higher price. Producers in country B are worse off. Why? They're getting a lower price. This is the burden for them. And they're selling a lower quantity. The money is going to the government of country A. They can use it in a way to benefit their the citizens of that country. All right. Now, this kind of analysis is there for when I'm buying what is called a final consumption good, chocolates or some kind of soft drink or fruit. All right. But what if the good on which the tax is put, on which the tariff is put actually, on which the tariff is put is actually an input into other industries within country A. So let's say steel. So now what happens is the price of steel in country A goes up. That means what? The price of steel in country A goes up. That means producers of, let's say, any good that requires steel, they have to pay a higher price, right? And then they have to pay a higher price for steel. Their cost goes up, and they will, other things being equal, the price that they will now be compelled to charge the consumers in country A, for that good will go up. The burden and the producers in country B, of course, are worse off, just like similarly out here. So with a tariff put on, let's say, steel, first thing that will happen is, the people who are buying the steel, let's say in this case now it's the producers of, some goods that require steel, they will be worse off because they have to pay a higher price. They will then pass off that higher price in part, okay, to their consumers. So the consumers in country A will be worse off. Producers in country B will, of course, be worse off. And then, because input prices have gone up for producers in country A, their export competitiveness will also go down. They'll be able to, their goods will become relatively more expensive as compared to before, for not only their own people in their own country, but for people in other countries. So this is the burden of taxation, or in this case, tariff. So definitely the other country, the country on whom the tariff is imposed is worse off, right? But the country which imposes the tariff, its own consumers are worse off. And if the good, is something that is used in the production of some other goods within country A, then the producers who buy that input, they will be worse off and will, then pass off will pass off part of that increase in cost to the consumers, and then the consumers will be worse off. Another person that benefits from this is domestic producers, okay, producers in country A who are producing goods which are substitutes, or which people could buy instead of the imported good. So they will benefit because now the overall supply in the market has gone down, because the quantity of imports has gone down. So they'll be able to charge a higher price. So they will benefit, right? Then this is the very first round of impacts of tariffs. If country A puts tariffs on imports from country B will in most likelihood also retaliate. And when they retaliate, they will then put tariffs on, goods that are coming from country A. And then again, we can do the analysis. In this case, similar analysis, producers in country A now, because the tariff is being imposed on goods from country A, they will be worse off, right? So that's it. Thank you.